Before we start, big week for us. Final exam Friday in class. We got our project that we're going to talk about today and get into our final content. So, any questions? Yeah.
Is there going to be preparation on Thursday?
Is what?
Is there going to be preparation in the evening on Thursday?
You mean for the test review?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we'll do Grant. He's going to do the practice. The thing that's a little bit different is he is traveling for, I think, his sport or something on Thursday. So we're going to do it Wednesday. So you guys are going to get it a little bit earlier this time. So sorry that that's the case. But I'll give you a little more time. Did you have another different question, Madison? Same one? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the project. The project is about the content we're going to start on today, and it's all on this last chapter that we're doing regarding economic freedom. So we call it the Economic Freedom Project. The purpose is to give you a better understanding of economic freedom by digging into some specific subtopic of your choice. That part will make more sense as we go through today. But the one thing I want you to keep in the back of your mind is you're going to pick a country. Can't be the United States, or if whatever country you're from, if you're an international student, it can't be your own country. Pick a country and write about the 5 economic freedom areas, scores for that country. Discuss what you think of that, why it has that ranking, and an introduction about a paragraph for each, and a conclusion should do it. The review should be typed double-spaced, have word max 300 minimum, 300 word minimum, 1,000 word maximum, so it's not real long. Include a short summary of economic freedom in general, short summary of the subtopic, and then an economic personal opinion of the subtopic. So that's kind of the contents. And so the freedom review is due no later than Sunday night. So Sunday night after class is done, but you might want to knock it out sooner. And then you've got 2 choices here. Each student will make a 60-second video presentation of his or her subtopic. So you don't have to go over the basics, but look at the subtopic. Look into the camera, don't read from a sheet, assume the audience knows the basics. You're given a quick elevator topic about your subtopic. Again, we'll kind of get into what those are here in a bit. And then choice number 2 is the one I actually prefer you to do. So this is on the syllabus, and I had extra copies of the syllabus here. I've got like at least 6 or 7 of them. So after class, if you guys want an extra copy, otherwise it is published on Blackboard. And so I like number 2 because what's going on Saturday? Graduation. So we got all these parents and stuff coming. So I like seeing the sidewalk chalk. So you can create an ad about economic freedom. I have sidewalk chalk in my office. If you don't have it at your dorm or otherwise, you can kind of check it out and basically create a little ad on the plaza here in between this building and administration building. So you can't do the sidewalk chalk at your apartment or something in Lawrence or whatever. The whole point is to have it here on campus. So you make the ad highlighting the thing, be as creative as you want, try to avoid writing full sentences, treat it like a print ad on a website banner. Economic freedom must be included and be prominent in your display. Take your picture of your work and upload it to Blackboard along with your paper. Yeah, Jesse?
You just answered my question.
Okay. Any questions there? All right, so let's get talking about economic freedom. So again, this is our last full chapter that we're going to have. And you know that our textbook and the institute we have here on campus is named after Jim Gordney. And he is kind of a pioneer in measuring freedom throughout the world in different countries. And so here's a photo, a nighttime photo, which is kind of fun to look at. What do you notice about the Korea area here? So we got South Korea and North Korea. This is a nighttime photo. What sticks out to you? Yeah, Tim?
South Korea is lit with lights, and
Yes.
North Korea only has Pyongyang.
Do you think there's a lot of economic activity over here when the sun goes down? No. And so if you guys know a little bit about North Korea, it's very communist and controlled by Kim Jong-un, and so there's not too much economic freedom going on over in North Korea. So what is economic freedom? So individuals have freedom when the property they own, they acquired without the use of force, fraud, or theft. So you got stuff, you have some material things, but you got it through voluntary exchange. You didn't steal somebody's stuff, right? So you have economic freedom when property you acquired without the use of that is protected from physical invasions by others. So you have a reasonable expectation that people are not going to be able to come and take your stuff. What do we have in the United States that kind of helps with this, that people just can't come and grab your stuff? Let me go back here. That's a softball question. What do we got in the United States that kind of keeps people from just taking your crap? Laws. Okay, what else? Security systems, good. What else? What happens when you dial 911? Somebody just assaulted you and took your car. Yeah, Jordan? Yeah, emergency people, the police, right? So I'm thinking the police, call up the police, and you got reasonable expectation that they're going to kind of help you out with your situation. So that's what we mean. That actually encourages more freedom, the fact that we don't have to spend a bunch of time ourselves trying to protect our own stuff, right? That we have these general protections that are available for the people of the community. So we have kind of these shared public type goods with the police and the laws, which the laws then bring in a court system. If somebody does you wrong, then you can sue them. So that's what we mean. So here it was more focusing on physical invasions. And you're free to use, exchange, or give, even destroy. That's not on here, but you can throw your stuff away if you want. Their property, as long as whatever you're doing, this is an important part, does not violate the identical rights of others. So kind of do whatever you want, as long as whatever you're doing isn't violating the same rights of somebody else, right? So that's the idea of individual economic freedom. And then the law of the land and the institutions involved are going to try to measure to what extent does this hold up in different countries around the world. So in order to achieve high economic freedom, a country must have government spending and taxes low. Well, why is that? Do you guys voluntarily pay your taxes? No. So imagine we've got one government here, one country that has a 20% tax rate. So at 20% tax, we've got $800, and in this country, there's a 40% tax. Which one is supporting more individual freedom? The one with the 40% tax or the one with the 20% tax when we look at our after-tax income? Which one's supporting more of this upper paragraph when you think about it that way? The higher tax country or the lower tax country? Which one's giving you more individual freedom? The lower tax, right? So you earned this money. This was your labor, not anybody else's, right? So some people say, well, you've got the right to your labor. That's the one thing we've got going for us, is the right to our own labor. And then here, the government's taking a cut, but this cut relative to this cut is granting more individual freedom. We're going to have you decide where the money's spent rather than somebody in Washington, D.C. deciding where the money's spent. Does that make sense? So again, we're just trying to come up with a way to measure. It's not necessarily promoting, in a sense, low taxes and low spending, but it's rather, how do we define a country that has more of these freedoms rather than less at the individual level, rather than maybe at the governmental level? All right? Provide access to sound money. So, how is our government at providing us with money that allows freedom exchange? What was one of our biggies related to sound money? What's our 3 biggies? Maybe not a bad idea to kind of identify those anyway. 3 biggies. Got to have those memorized for Friday. Low and stable inflation. And that's the one bingo that I wanted to hit. What's the other 2?
Minimum unemployment.
Okay, low unemployment or natural rate. And then what's the other one? Increasing real GDP. The quantity of beer, pizza, and chicken wings, right? So economic growth. And so here, provide access to sound money is where our government didn't do us any favors really the last couple of years with how they handled the money supply. So sound money means low and stable inflation. They previously did a pretty good job over the 20 years of keeping us around a 2% inflation rate. At least it's pretty low and it's pretty stable. But if they start to get a little crazy, and then of course we talked about Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Argentina, where we don't have access to sound money, it causes a lot of friction, a lot of inefficiencies. So how good is the government at providing access to sound money? So that's going to be measured through like, well, what does your inflation rate look like in your country? Protecting property rights. So again, this is through our court system and individual rights, police and courts. They measure this in different countries by, it's funny when I give this presentation in especially developing countries, and I say something like, well, if you call the police, what's your expectation that they're going to show? And sometimes they just burst out laughing. And I'm serious, right? Like in a lot of countries, if you call the police, nobody's coming, so then you just don't call, right? You kind of have to protect yourself, your stuff more. So how reasonable is that? So kind of they do some survey data on a scale of 1 to 10. If you call the police, what's the chances that you're going to have somebody show up, and when are they going to show up? Are they going to show up timely or the next day? If you get put into court, what's the odds that you're going to get a fair trial, right? So that's another one where it can be a joke in different countries. Whoever's got the most money can bribe the most for the judge and get things moving their direction. So that is kind of on the property rights angle. All right, this country must also refrain from imposing trade barriers. So back in week 1, we talked about tariffs, which were taxes on imports, and quotas, and maybe some other sorts of regulations that would end up kind of keeping international trade from happening. And so people in other countries have more individual freedom when they can freely trade with their brothers and sisters around the world, right? If you can buy something from Germany, you buy something from France, and there's not a government that's somehow creating a roadblock in some way, shape, or form for you to trade with people all over the world, not just the people domestically. Okay, and then finally, regulations that undermine voluntary exchange. So how much licensing requirements are there for safety? So in the United States here, you have to have about, 1,600 hours to cut hair. So if you want to be a stylist, you have to go to school for 1,600 hours. The tuition rates are running at least $20,000 at most salon schools. And so that creates a barrier for you to want to make a living for yourself cutting hair. When I went to India, I got a haircut on the street, and it was pretty sweet. This guy just had a place on the sidewalk. There was no permit, no nothing needed. He had a pair of scissors and a comb. Looked like it was kept pretty nice. I mean, I felt comfortable getting my hair cut, that I wasn't going to get lice or something nasty. And so he just opened up a business by having a chair and the apron type thing, and he just cut my hair. Right? He didn't need 1,600 hours of training and $20,000 of tuition. He just got up out of his place and went down to the sidewalk and created a little haircutting business. Right? That doesn't happen everywhere. So, to what extent are there regulations that keep voluntary exchange undermined, if there's labor laws and restrictions on hours and full-time work versus part-time work and benefit packages, and so other things that can lead to various types of restrictions. All right, so that's the 5 things. Any questions or comments?
I guess what happens if you don't have like a license account here? I mean, you couldn't open up a business proper, but you could still do it. I don't.
No, you can't. You get thrown in jail. So in Ottawa, little old Ottawa, this was just last fall, or I guess it was a year ago, but it was potentially going to go to trial. A gal here in town wanted to sell honey at the farmer's market, and she had the bees in her yard. And there was an old law in the books that says you can't do that. You can't have bees and sell honey. You can have bees, but you couldn't sell the honey at the farmer's market without having a permit or fees or some sort of restriction. There was a law in the books. So the city of Ottawa got sued. And that, you know, God bless America, we do have property rights protection, and the city government said, you know what, you're right, that's kind of a stupid law. And they decided not to go to trial with it. And so the Kansas Justice Institute helped to support the legal fees, because she's just a regular, you know, Ottawan that wanted to raise some honey and grow some stuff in the backyard. She had other vegetables and stuff. So, you know, to what extent are people able to do that, right, without having a bunch of problems? And so you can get shut down. So there's other cases with like hair braiding and haircuts where people have been shut down. You can't operate without a business license. Okay, any other questions or comments there? All right, so there are 162 countries. I think we might even be up to 164. They sometimes pick up new ones if there's data. But 162 countries, which is most of the countries around the world. And there is 42 variables grouped into the 5 areas that basically outline the ones I just talked about. And it's been going on for a long period of time. There's only 102 countries with enough data back to 1980. And then every country gets a number between 0 and 10, indicating the amount of freedom that they have. A higher score means more freedom, a lower score means less freedom. And the final number is just a simple average of those 5 areas. Those areas are officially here. Size of government, which is kind of alluding to this one. Legal system and protection of property rights, police and court system. Access to sound money, going to look at inflation type stuff. Freedom to trade, what sort of restrictions do we have in our country for international trade? And then the regulations for like hair cutting and other things, labor and business regulations that are there on the books. So this area will get a 0 to 10 number through piling together a bunch of the data from the 42 variables. Well, each one of these areas, you know, so this one might be a 4, this one might be a 5, this might be a 7, this one might be an 8, whatever. And then those 5 numbers, just add them up, divide by 5, a simple average, and that's how we get our one single number that shows the freedom around the world.
Are we going to find these numbers online, or do we come up with them?
Yep, I'm going to get there in a sec. So this is the map that you guys will find on the website. So if you go to freetheworld.com, so freetheworld.com, the Fraser Institute is the organization that compiles this data every year, and Jim Gortney would work on this project every year. It gets published in the fall. And so there's a little bit of delay since we talked about lag times last week, especially with GDP and other data. So it's always going to be a little bit behind, 1 to 2 years behind on what the ranking is. So number 1 over here is Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, New Zealand. There's the United States. So we're 5th in the world Ireland, Denmark, Australia, UK, Canada, Taiwan, Lithuania. So that's those. And around the world then, this map is interactive. So when you hover over the country, we get a rank of 5 and a score of 8.14. And that's that number of those 5 things. So your project is going to be pick any country around the world, as long as it's not the United States or whatever your home country is, and you can do an analysis on it. This color coding is kind of important in the sense of trying to just grouping the whole world into these quartiles. So the most free countries are the blue ones. The least free countries are the red ones. And then you kind of have this orange and this other color, lime green of some sort, or lighter yellowish green, mustard. Yeah.
Gray is no data.
What?
Gray is no data.
The gray is no data, yes. So those are countries that don't have any data. So North Korea is one of them, Kim Jong-un.
What could be?
So then you get no score, North Korea.
What could be the reason for no data?
The government is probably corrupt and doesn't want give out their information. Yeah, that's pretty much the answer. So they don't have the data.
And green.
So it's usually not a good sign if they don't have data. It means that they're probably, well here, I'll go through some of the gray ones here. So Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, right? Sudan, if you guys know problems in the Sudanese government. Somalia, right? So these are all places that are kind of a big mess.
Why is
basically.
Greenland exogenous?
Greenland's just a big wasteland. Yeah, the Greenland's probably the exception. There's basically no life there for the most part. I don't know totally all the story there. So where do we find a lot of not so free countries? What continent? Africa, right? So here we got a lot in here. So let me blow this out one. Oh, that's as small as it goes here. I think I can do that. And then we've got South America here. Argentina, not doing so hot. And Brazil, so not a lot of blue here, but we do have some shining lights like Chile and Peru over in South America. And we've got Guatemala actually is up here. There's Mexico, Belize, there's Guatemala, ranked 40th. And what do we got here? I need to blow this up. Costa Rica, 21. Panama. Romania. Austria, there's Germany, 23. France, 47, so you're in the second tier. So what's interesting up in Europe is that a lot of times, well, Americans anyway have this perception that, let's be like Europe and be socialist with free education and free healthcare and this and that. And the truth is, a lot of these countries, some of them are more free than the United States. So Sweden, they're all blue. So they're very market-based. It's very capitalist type base. They might have a bigger social safety net in some cases, but in general, they're not some form of socialism that some people think. All right, so let's see. Anybody want me to pick a country here?
What's that small one? Italy. South.
That's the boot. Yeah, Italy's there.
Yeah, the green
And
one.
we got Croatia kicking the boot. Anybody want a country? I'll hover over it. Give me 5 countries. I'm going to put the United States in here for this one. So what you can do is put the country there. Did you say Iceland?
Iceland and Dubai.
Okay. No, I'm going to let other people pick. So Iceland. Somebody give me another country. I want 5 total. Turkey, Botswana. Turkey.
Ethiopia.
Botswana. Now, what am I? Is Turkey not? Is that a different title now?
Hungary.
Turkmenistan?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is that their official name?
Must be.
Oh, this is it, I think.
Yeah.
That's Turkey right there. Yeah. Okay. Got the funny name for it. And then I heard somebody else say, what was it? Excuse me? What was it? Portugal. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Okay. So, this is a kind of a nice smattering. Now notice as we were putting in the lines here, we had different ones lighting up in different areas. And Botswana, by the way, you guys, is down here. And Botswana is one of our shining lights in Africa. Shining anyway, the beacon of freedom. And so now if you go to the data set, you'll have all of the numbers here. So here's the United States. Iceland was up there as well. So here's their ranking, 5, 14, 36, 77, and 101. And then you can kind of see where they're falling short on different areas. So the United States is good here. Let's see. So here's a good one. So Iceland is actually scoring higher in legal system and property rights than the United States. So that's kind of an interesting example of like that certain areas, countries might score higher. And so just because one is fairly free doesn't mean that they're free in all different areas. Here's both of these countries, Iceland and Portugal, are scoring a little bit higher than the United States, probably due to like Trump's tariffs that he put in, which are pretty stupid. When he first took office with like steel, and there was a few lingering tariffs that got put into place that was kind of protectionist. And regulations, so United States scores about the best there. And so that is each of the areas and their numbers. And then you can do the graph, which is kind of nice because you can see how countries have changed over time. So one thing about this economic freedom is if you change your policies and like, let's say, get rid of some tariffs or do something else, the impact that it has on income and some other things takes a while. This is a longer term project. It doesn't happen overnight that all of a sudden your country's going to become prosperous because some countries, fall back into their old ways. And so here's the list. So here was kind of an interesting crossing point. This blue was Turkey. And so look at this double cross here with Botswana. So Botswana is above Turkey. Then they meet and cross. And then Turkey falls back into their ways and Botswana kept up, right? So over time, you can kind of see how with different policies that change and evolve, countries can kind of morph over time. Okay, so then you can do all of the individual graphs over time now. So now this is what we call time series data, where we're looking not just at the snapshot in time of the most recent score, but we can kind of see over time where things have changed. And so Botswana started making some progress here through the 80s and into 2000 and then jumped up. So that's with size of government, legal system, sound money. So here's Iceland. During the financial crisis, Iceland was kind of a mess, and then they did some reforms and locked down their currency to keep it low and stable, and so they started scoring higher on their country. Freedom to trade and regulation. All right, any questions on those things? That's probably the basics that you can do for your project to get them going. Let me go back to the map. I want to do one other thing that's kind of fun. Get rid of these countries. Is to look at what's happened to economic freedom over time. So if you run this little play button, you're going to see the world kind of changing over time since 1970. And here's their economic freedom scores. Notice Russia, China is all red. 2002, 2004. And then you're going to see kind of a big change, boom. They start to liberalize and get more market-based, adding more economic freedom into their country. Some of them plus, some of them minus. In general, the world's moved towards freedom overall, which is good news for reasons we'll get into later. All right, any last questions or comments there? So freetheworld.com, if you want to jot that down, that's where you want to go, the Fraser Institute. There is another one that is it's a fine thing, but I want to keep the whole class consistent. So do not use the Heritage Foundation Freedom Report. So they're kind of a copycat that started coming later. This is the original one, but I just want the whole class to kind of be using the same one. Their results are very consistent anyway. So make sure you use the Fraser Institute, freetheworld.com. If you just Google economic freedom or something like that, you'll probably get the Heritage Foundation one and some, there's another one too, and some other different ones. Oh, I know what I wanted to show you guys was this. So under research, so we had gender, a person who specialized in bringing women's rights into the publication last fall. I don't know if you guys remember Dr. Rosemary Fike. We had an event, and she presented on what she's done with getting women's rights in there. And then this Human Freedom Index is a little bit different with the measurement of things. And then here's the one we're looking at. The Economic Freedom of the World 2023 is when it was published last. And again, it uses the 21 data. And so if you click on the full report, it's a fairly lengthy report, 126 pages. You do not have to read it all. But I wanted to show you kind of this couple pictures here on the front end. It does say kind of where's economic freedom and what it is, some descriptions. And then here is all the countries. And so you see the color coding thing. So we've got, oh wait, this is the, sorry, this is of the states. There's another one here that's going to be of the world. This was a special report there they did for the states. Okay, yada, yada, yada. Must be chapter 2 then. Unless I skipped over it or anything. Okay, I did want to show this real quick here too. So remember the 46 variables? Well, this is the categories of each one. Labor regulations, minimum wage, flexible wage, private ownerships, bank ownership of stuff, all of Area 3, legal system and property rights, integrity of the legal system, military interference, real property, police and crime, and then down here for inflation with sound money. So those are all the areas. Let me skip that. Oh shoot, right there. Well, that's the Mexican states. Well, they always have it at the front end. Oh well. Okay, then your country, once we get into this area, whatever country you pick is in, oh, I know what I did. I think I screwed up. That's why. Economic freedom of North America. So that's why the report. Scroll down a little bit further and economic freedom of the world. Okay, all right, sorry about that. So you guys want the world report. Let me go back and try this again. So it's kind of laid out very similar. Oops, what is this? This is the, oh, that was the full publication. Okay, here we go. Now, I'd already talked about what I wanted to talk about, but here is the full list of countries, which might be kind of a nice thing for you to do right here. So that is Singapore. There's our top 10 that we showed before. Here's the green countries. The yellow countries are in the third quartile. And then we have the least free countries with the poster child of what not to do with your country, being Venezuela. Zimbabwe's in second to last place, so they're at least not in the bottom tier, but so we got Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and then Sudan, Iran, Argentina. So these are the ones that are not having as good a outcomes as others. Okay, so questions on the report. So now I've exposed you to that. So this, again, has all this front chapter 1 has all of the areas and what they mean. So there's the 5 areas and a little bit nicer than what I was on the wrong publication before. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. So what's the big deal? All right. So here's the top countries. They just kind of selected a few from the older report. So the middle of the road, there's our French, Chile, top 10, bottom 10. Here is economic freedom around the world. So international aid programs have in large part been a disaster. So that is not how to pull the world out of poverty. It turns out people just want to work, and they're happy to look out for themselves if they have some of these basics in play of a decent police system, legal system, low barriers to trade, right? And so economic freedom has been growing over time, and that's been good news for the world. Now, what happened in 2020?
World ended.
Yeah, we had a little, did the government add some controls in your life that said you can't be free? Just a few, right? And so one of the things that'll be interesting as these new, like especially this fall, to see how much of a rebound was done. Unfortunately, we learned in one of our chapters, an author said that he's found this ratchet effect. The ratchet effect was essentially if the government was able to impose a control on you in some way, shape, or form, they tend not to let it go. Like it wasn't, there's no such thing as real temporary, oh, let's just handle the crisis and we'll, obviously we're not being forced to wear masks and hide in our homes anymore, but that was the ratchet effect. So we'll see how much if we start back on this trend here, which was looking good for freedom around the world. Okay, so what do you think about inequality? Is inequality, income inequality, better or worse today than it was 20 years ago? Do you think the distance between the rich and the poor, is it getting worse or getting better?
I'd say it's about the same.
About the same? Seems like you hear a lot on the news about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, right? So it turns out, the reason I framed it that way is that there's a lot of talk about that, but there is good news from a country level basis that the poor countries are catching up to the rich countries. So in terms of freedom, the gap is closing because there is more freedom, and that's having bigger impacts on the poorer countries than it is the richer countries who are already there. So that type of inequality is actually shrinking around the world, this difference between the developed countries and the developing countries between 1980 and 2015. Okay, so now let's get into the outcomes. So economic freedom, we can say, oh, Russ, I love that I have the right to do what I want to do as long as I'm not hurting anybody, kind of the golden rule, so to speak, right? Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. So, but what are the outcomes in terms of like real GDP? We talked about that one at the beginning. Well, here it is. This is the average of the top 25% at 48,000 in terms of income per person. So income per person, 48,000. In the least free countries, $6,500. Now, this you might kind of say, oh, well, everything's cheap in the developing country, and over in Africa, rice and beans is really cheap. Well, this has been adjusted for what we call purchasing power parity. So it's been adjusted for purchasing power and exchange rates using whatever currency they are. And so this is like, what I like to say is, back when a hamburger was $1, I might have to change this, but come up with another dollar item. But a hamburger, if a hamburger is $1, like a little small slider, in this country you can buy 48,251 hamburgers, right? This is your real purchasing power of your money. In this country you can buy 6,500 hamburgers in terms of your real purchasing power. Is that a significant difference in well-being? Yes, putting food in your stomach is a good thing. Now check it out, what's even more interesting, I think, is that if you add a little bit more freedom, you get a lot out of it, right? Double the cheeseburgers, double the hamburgers, 6,500 to 14,000, just by getting your country a little less out of whack, right? If you can add a little more freedom, you get some big results here in terms of material well-being. And then another significant jump moving this direction, right? So we see fairly significant jumps in material well-being by changing the types of institutions so that they support individual economic freedom more so than centrally planned government ideas about how to run the country. Okay, questions or comments on that? So that's our real GDP number. All right, well, real GDP is nice for us, but how about length of life? Free countries, 80. Not so free countries, 66. Now, is 14 years of living significant?
Yes.
Yeah, how many of you are still, not in your teens, right? 18 or 19, there's a few of you in here at least. So 14 years is a lot of time, right? So this is just sucking air. Living in a country where there's more freedom allows you to suck air a little bit longer than places that aren't so free. How about babies? How many of you like babies? How many of you like that babies don't die? Show of hands. I'm hoping I see a lot of hands go up. Okay, so infant mortality means dead babies, right? So I want to give a little bit of seriousness here, that it's not just money and well-being and poverty, but this is mortality rate per 1,000 live births. You got 36 dead babies out of 1,000 births in this country versus these free countries at 4.8. That's 32 babies. That's a pretty big deal, right? So countries that support more individual economic freedom, again, we see the same type of pattern. We're saving more babies, coming this way, adding more freedom, moving this direction. All right, well, how about the poor? So I really care more about the poor than the rich. I don't really care about income inequality all by itself without more of some sort of story there. And so this is the share of the poorest of the poor, the 10%, kind of the bottom 10%. Not the 25%, not the 20%, the bottom 10%. And what we find is that this one isn't that big of a deal, but this is just the share of income of the bottom of the 10%, the poor of the poor. And so what is significant is how much of a share you're getting. So in places like the United States, the poor of the poor have 14,000 hamburgers. The poor of the poor here have 1,700 hamburgers, right? So if you're going to be in a bad situation, you're better off being in a free country as opposed to a not so free country in terms of the poor of the poor. And again, that is all in terms of your real material well-being. How many people died of starvation last year in the United States? How many people? A couple hundred? United States, we've got about 330 million people. How many people died of starvation in the United States?
10,000.
10,000, too high. Give me a number. Shoot out a number. 3,000? Shoot out a number. How many people died of starvation? 1,000. 10,000. 5,000. 7,000. 2,000. You guys are way too high. You're actually infinitely too high. 0 people died of starvation. We don't die of starvation in the United States because we're freaking rich. Because we're free. We don't die of starvation, people. Right? There's going to be an agency or something else that's going to be able to help you. We don't die from starvation. In these countries, people die. People die.
Listen, I get what you're saying.
All right, I'll come back to questions and comments later. You got to get through the content. So here we go, least free poverty rates. So you guys have heard of kind of living on $1 a day type of thing or something like that? $2 a day is kind of the new metric, probably due to inflation. But here's a Starbucks, right? Actually, Starbucks is probably more than that for a lot of these fancy lattes. $5.50. This is how much they're making per day. $5.50. Look at this is the fraction of the population. 68% of the whole freaking country is living on your Starbucks this morning. That's significant, right? And then half of that is here at 30%, living on $2 a day in those red countries. As we move towards freedom, we get lots and lots less poverty. Lots and lots less poverty. Let me get through a couple more here. All right, so that less poverty rates. School enrollment. So around the world, people do pretty good with the K through 6. So this is the primary education. And then once we get into high school, we see a lot of a significant drop here in education rates. In the most free countries, we're seeing both levels pretty high. All right, so political rights, so the right to vote and control, that sort of thing. Civil liberties. So where do you want to be gay? In a free country or a not so free country? Where do you have more rights? Civil liberties are the right to be gay if that's your thing. A free country, right? So this data bears that out, that you have more rights, more individual rights. You guys know that some places like Russia, they don't look too kindly on LGBTQ type stuff, right? You don't want, that's tough. So free countries have more political, the rights to vote, but also civil liberties. Where do you want to be a woman? In a free country or a not so free country? In a free country, right? So women's rights, that's what Dr. Fike came and spoke on campus a little bit more on her work there. But again, the data's been showing that women's rights in more free countries are a lot higher. And so that is in there. And then happiness. We actually measure happiness in econ. So imagine that. We have a happiness meter. All of us have an internal happiness meter. And so this is from survey data, which can be kind of questionable sometimes, but you get enough data and you start to get at least, it says on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank your happiness? Something like that, right? And so self-reported happiness is higher in more free countries. Again, the same pattern when we look across the countries, more freedom leading to more happiness. Okay, let me open the floor for questions and comments. Tim?
The purchasing power was calculated in that. So
Yes. Are you talking about like the poverty?
yeah.
Yeah, so
because the numbers seem
purchasing
so
power, yes. So all of the purchasing power was calculated into that number, yes. Yep. Okay, other things.
There's at least one person who has started at this country, I guarantee you.
Okay, you find it. Lazar. Yeah, that's your challenge, Jesse. I'm serious. Okay. Oh, yes, I'm glad you reminded me of that. Yeah, so you need to email me if you want to redo one of your mind tap tests. So tell me which one, and then I will reset it for you and send you an email back. So one test, everybody gets a freebie.
If I did a homework test visually, can I do that one instead of like an actual test?
No, I only do it for the test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, so yes. 5 areas, yes. Hold your horses here, we still got another minute. 5 areas. Oh, you just wanted to write them down? Okay. So yeah, for your subtitle, now you guys can start to work on your project. We went over the project again. I've got some extra printed syllabus. If you want a copy of the project, raise your hand and I can pass them out. Otherwise, it's on Blackboard. So, all right, you are dismissed. See you tomorrow.